Hello, live from New York. It's Thursday afternoon, and here we are at the first of a series of four webinars presentations. And I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining me today. And I'm very happy to join you all today. So we look forward to a maybe informative, if not enlivening, enriching hour together. The first hour here will be an introductory hour, and then we meet on successive Tuesdays, the 29th of June, the 6th of July, the 13th of July, and those will be, each of those three will be for an hour and a half. This will include this lecture, a lecture presentation like today, and plus a question and answer part of it as well. So we wanted to start off today to talk about the meaning of cancer. The whole series will be on focusing on cancer, and we're using as an introductory book that's come out called Reversing Cancer. I hope you can see that clearly. Reversing Cancer through Mental Imagery. It's a book that's written by a woman, a student of my teacher of blessed memory, who studied with her for about 20 years, just focusing on the topic of cancer and being supervised by her about this condition. This is a seminal book for really what I'm going to be talking about today and for the next three meetings that we have. So this is available through my website, drjerryepstein.org, or through Amazon. Okay, thank you. And so I want to give you a little bit about my background before launching into this whole series starting today. I would say that what we're talking about is really, I can really put together as the hologram for all chronic illness. That cancer is a chronic ailment, and all chronic diseases, no matter what they're named, and there are about maybe roughly 50,000 names that appear in the manual, the official manual of the Medical Association for the names of diseases. So, but all chronic, and we'll find out why all chronic diseases as we move along are just one. And consequently, this would be, as I mentioned, a hologram for it all, because hologram means, hollow means whole, and gram means a message. So it's a message that's being delivered of wholeness. And we're going to cover how one ailment, cancer, over the course of the time together, reflects all of it, all of the ailments. And we're going to be getting into the mechanism of disease. We're going to be getting into the relationship of our physical to our mental and to our other disturbances, the body, mind, and spirit part of it, as it's usually called. We're going to explore that in a little more depth and expand it a bit, and talk about belief systems and how they play a part. A person just called me a couple of days ago and told me that her friend is in a great deal of distress because her husband was told that he has 2 weeks to live. And that is a detestable statement to make by somebody in a position of authority, to tell somebody exactly how long they have to live as though they are God. I've always wanted to have these clinicians go with me to the racetrack, since they know when you're going to die. They obviously are going to know who's going to win who's going to win the horse races and the 8 races at the racetrack. So be that as it may, we're going to cover that, the very important technique and method that I just showed you by this book called Mental Imagery, which is the way of summoning the power of your mind and your mental process specifically to deal with the physical disturbance and other disturbances that are involved, that we're going to explore when we get into the wholeness of this condition. And so we're going to use other allied techniques to present, basically summoning your will and your will to live to come to your aid, to provide the means for you to reverse this. It's a unique process I'm talking about, because we're using something from within yourself to make the shift and the biological changes that are taking place in your system. This system that I'm speaking of was the way it was for thousands of years. It was practiced this way and was the going system of the Western healthcare tradition, stemming back 4 to 5 thousand years. Last 400 years, there's been a shift, and where the mind and the body were split, and consequently the mind was tossed away. What we're doing here is reintroducing the processes of mind through the function of the mental life to affect and to reflect itself rather in the physiology and biology of our existence. That's the way it was and understood over many millennia, and it never died. It was submerged, and we bring it back to the surface. About myself, I was trained originally as an MD, became very fascinated before even trained as an MD. I was very interested in the mind, in mental life, in hypnosis, in extrasensory perception, functions of intuition, psychic ability, all kinds of processes that have to do with the mental life. And when I went into medicine, I specifically went to become a psychiatrist, which I did. And from that, I went on to graduate training as a psychoanalyst. And from that, having published in that field and done research in that field, I went and found, without expecting it and without indicating an intention toward it, I was introduced to a teacher in Jerusalem who became my teacher of blessed memory, named Colette Aboulker-Muscat, whose work, this book I just showed you, is the basis for the functioning of changing the physical, emotional, and mental and social status and creative status and moral status of our lives through this inner process. And then I was trained by her starting in 1974, and I went through a very intense 7-year apprenticeship before earning my graduation stripes. And then from then on, I flew with it and have since been in active process of this work for over 40 years. And that's included creating a postgraduate training center authorized by the state of New York called the American Institute for Mental Imagery, having written nearly about 40 articles on the subject, published 6 books, just completing my 7th book, which I hope to have out this year. The CD sets that I've created, maybe 5 or 6 of them that are available. And so I've been a teacher, a researcher, and I've had successful research studies done in this work that I participated in, and was the main professional, the one who gave the imagery for the activity, which had to do with asthma, which was published, and with increasing heart rate strength and variability, which has been published, and also establishing this very deep inner journey search called Waking Dream, a very intense offshoot of imagination work, which is long and a singular journey by an individual to the depths of oneself and to the heights of oneself, which was a research study I participated in, comparing it with hypnosis and meditation to show, and it showed that this work was singularly and different from the other 2 states I just mentioned, from hypnosis and from meditation. So having said all of that and carrying on still in the same framework and without stinting, without stopping, without any abeyance, and going on like this for since I met my teacher in May of 1974 in this line, and having all that background before even meeting her, here I am to show you some things about what I understand about this condition and how we may benefit from using yourself as your own agent of healing, and your own and using your own inner talents, your own processes that are available to you that I teach you and you can learn to use very quickly. And I want to start off in talking about that to say that here's some examples. A man comes to me with carcinoma of the prostate, and he comes to me in September of a given year, not too long ago. And he's told in June that he has 3 months to live. You see, something that can't be said to a human being by another human being. And it's something that really needs to be avoided. We will go more into that situation when we talk about the healing relationship, also in the next 3 sections of our get-together, and how the healing relationship is to be conducted between yourself and the one who's you're counting on for giving you what you need and providing you what you need for you to make the turn in your life and to reverse this life situation. So he was told in June of that year that he would be dead in 3 months. He came to see me when he serendipitously found a book that kind of flew off the shelf to him in the bookstore when he was searching for self-help and books of that sort. And this book landed in his hands, which is my benchmark book called Healing Visualizations, Creating Health Through Imagery. It came out in 1989 and is still now, I think, in its 21st printing and has been published in 23 countries in 20 languages and so on. And he came to me because he saw that this was his last resort. A number of people come to me as last resort people because they, as they say, I've tried everything. And I would say to them, that's nice to hear. Have you done mental imagery? What? I don't know about that, but I did find out. I didn't do that, but I found out about it. Somebody told me, I found the book or something came my way. And so okay, you tried almost everything. So here's the everything. So we did an imagery exercise for the cancer of the prostate. He was not on any real medication at this point because they had tried various medications for him, which didn't work. He had some degree of metastasis that had spread to other organs, and he had a test for prostate function called PSA, which was very high. It was at 24. And the normal is 0 to 5. And so everything was in place for him to have a definitive diagnosis of this condition. And we started with an imagery exercise that I gave him to do. I will give you an imagery exercise today, and also 2, one for calming your emotional state and one for cancer itself. So he did as a general cleansing, as a general exercise for all cancers. So he did the exercise, and I asked him to come back in 3 weeks to let me know. I didn't need to see him. He needed to do the work himself because the work of this self-healing requires your responsibility and taking it on yourself to do it on your own. I'm there to tweak it. I can tune it up. I can be called for a chat to see how you're getting along and see what needs to be done, whether you're in tune, on target. We can go over it and see that what's in place, what's not in place, and set everything up correctly to kind of shepherd you that way through the process. But you need to take your time to do it. We have time. When cancer is given as a diagnosis, you must remember that you have time. The diagnosis as it's presented to you gives you the understanding from their point of view that your time is limited, that time is shortened, and it's not the case. You have plenty of time. So you're not, your death is not upon you at this moment. It's not a fact of your life right here now. You have time. So he was to do this exercise 3 times a day because he was dosing spiritual or mind medicine to himself, just as you would dose any sort of supplement or herb or whatever you're taking or pharmacological agent. you would do it at certain times of the day. We do it in the morning, in the early morning, first thing you can as you get up, late afternoon, after your day is sort of wending its way into night, and before bed, 3 times a day. So you go to sleep in a calm state. So he did that, and he did it for 3 times a day. He didn't call me, and he came back after 3 weeks, and he told me what he was experiencing, and he said his urinary problems had disappeared. There was no lower abdominal pain. He was feeling energetic, and everything was going well, and he seemed to be in very fine shape, and he said he was eating well and sleeping well and all of that. And I said, "You're healed." And he said, "That's ridiculous. What are you talking about? That in 3 weeks, this is all said?" I said, "Whatever you're telling me, you just gave me an indication. You sort of described to me your situation. And from what you've told me, it's clear that you are free of the cancer." He said, "I can't believe that." He said, "I'm going to go and have myself checked out again. I'm going to go to the doctor, and I'm going to do the tests that they would use for me to determine what my status is." And I said, "Well, look, before you do," he said, "can I do this for another 3 weeks?" I said, "Sure." So he did it for another 3 weeks, came back to me, and gave me the same story. And I said, I have nothing more to tell you other than you don't need me anymore. At this point, you are healed. The symptoms are resolved, they're gone, and you're in fine condition, and there is no symptomatology, and everything is good. It's not like it was before when you were aching and feeling low and feeling like your life was coming to an end and everything is good. He said, "I'm going to have these tests done." So we're now in October, and he said he was going off, and he did, and he called me back in December, and he said, "I did all the tests, and it turns out that my prostate test, called the PSA, is at 4, and it was a 2 or 3, something in that area, 2 or 3, and that he was told that he was perfectly normal. In fact, it may have been 0.4 at that point, and that all of the radiograms that were done to determine metastases and everything showed that there was no metastases, that it all had disappeared, and whatever they were doing as cancer marker tests, it disappeared. They were normal, and that was that. And he finally could accept that his own inner work did the job, and I was very grateful for his going to the lengths that he went to find out what the circumstance was for him, what the condition turned out to be, finally pursuing it, validating it, and seeking to verify what he himself had experienced inwardly. He kept in touch with me rather infrequently over the period of time, and maybe every few years he called me to tell me that he was doing well. And then he died, and his family contacted me 11 years later to tell me that he had died of a heart attack. That's a different story. So the second was a woman came to me who had cancer of the lung, and she was told again that her case was ominous, that her situation was ominous, and that she was going to be and very concerned and made to be concerned that her life was hanging in the balance. And consequently, we went to work and did an imagery exercise for her, which she agreed to with me, because there are exercises that are very aggressive. There are exercises that are more gentle, more passive, if you will. It depends on your nature and what you would be comfortable with. There are certain people I've done imagery with, for example, for Epstein-Barr condition or those kinds of conditions, which has a possibility of seeking out an animal whom you might want to not kill, and so on. You might want to contain it and to conquer it that way, to truss it up and make it less dangerous. It all depends on your nature, but you can fit an imagery exercise for anything that you like, because the imaginal process is limitless, and you can create whatever you need. It's a creative act. It's an artistic act. You're the artist. You're the author. You're writing your own script. And we'll get into that when we get into beliefs. You write the own script of your life. You're writing a new script, a new biography. You're creating a new possibility for yourself. You're finding your artistic talent and possibilities coming to the forefront. All kinds of things are happening that are quite different and quite, if you will, out of the box or unfamiliar to you, but they're lying dormant. And what we're doing is we're waking it up. And so we're coming awake out of the sleep that we are walking around in or have been put into by getting some sort of diagnosis like this that has made us go almost comatose or feel despairing or desolated and so on. So consequently, we did an exercise for her for the cancer of the lung that she agreed to. And what she agreed to do was to put it in solitary confinement in the lung. She built a wall around it. There was no light. There was no air. And she wouldn't even allow a slot for it to slip the food in. So it was in a solitary cell that was impenetrable, and that the tumor was encased in that cell. And she starved it. No light, no air, no food. And after a period of 3 weeks, she did this exercise 3 times a day. And then consequently, following that, she I say 3 weeks because it takes up to 21 days to establish a new habit within our bodies and in our mental life and in our social life, in all the ways of experiencing ourselves in the world. Research has shown that to create new habits takes about 21-day period of repetition, going to your mental gym, as I call it, and going through mental reps. And you're building up mental abs and mental pecs and mental lats, and you're building up a new body of life for yourself. And so she went afterwards to have herself checked out. They did the x-rays, and so on, and they found that the cancer was gone. And that so far, and I've heard from her occasionally from time to time, she's contacted me to tell me that everything is fine. And I think it's roughly about a 10-year period or so, but everything has been okay for her and so on. So in another instance, a woman came with a cancer of the gut, and I asked her to see what the cancer looks like, and she said, I see 2 monsters coming out of a cave. I said, so let's find a way that you can approach these monsters and take care of them and conquer them. I like to use the term conquer because I don't want to suggest a way that you might or might not like. Just to conquer, though, is acceptable. You got to conquer. How you got to conquer them? And the upshot of it was that she became a knight with with armor and with a sharp lance and another instrument, that they used in the Middle Ages to wield with the spikes in it and so on. And she didn't run from them, but she felt brave because she was now dressed with some protection. She went toward them and she conquered these 2 monsters, and as they say, she slew them, as it would be a kind of a middle terms of the Middle Ages. So she slew these 2 monsters and took control and took charge of her inner state of being. We're teaching you to take charge of your inner state of being in many ways here, that when you do that, it also has the effects of taking charge of your outer state of being. The outer state of being in this case may be your physical body and your life in the world, which we will cover quite deeply, more exploratory in the next 3 meetings that we have. So now there's an interesting finding I wanted to share with you by a doctor from Germany named Reike, R-I-K-E, second name Gerd, G-E-R-D, Hamer, H-A-M-E-R, himself an MD. And he was practicing there in the conventional way. I call it conventional medicine, not traditional medicine. The way I am approaching this and sharing with you is traditional, meaning that it's the ongoing flow of life uninterruptedly in a steady stream for the past 5,000 or 6,000 years of our recorded history. Conventional medicine is something new that's been with us for about the past 400 years, when there was a shift in Western thinking, and the physical and the mental and the mind and the body was split. And so everything that had to do that wasn't calculable, measurable, and so on was thrown out. Only what you could retrieve by your senses, your five senses here, had any meaning. Nothing else had meaning. So the mental life was thrown away. The imaginal life, the inner resources of the mind were thrown away. And eventually, and along with it, God was thrown away as a kind of an invisible source which we can draw on for our sustenance and well-being. All of that was thrown out. So he was practicing in this way, and one day he noticed a sharp pain in his testicles, and he went and had it examined, and he found out that he had cancer of the testicles. And he started to, he didn't go into a mode of panic or distress or thinking that everything was at an end for him. It actually spurred him to look further into this matter. Why should a man of such health as he was in be suddenly beset by this kind of a condition without there being any indication of it prior? Because he was in good health as far as he knew, and his status physically was fine. He was doing his own clinical work and had a successful practice. Everything was going on. It's hunky-dory. He looked into it more and discovered that his son, his only progeny, died a month earlier, was shot. Either it was an accident and he was accidentally shot by a friend that he was out on a hunting expedition with. So he was shot and died. It was either an accident or a murder, but nevertheless, the boy, his only progeny, died. Just some food for thought for you now about this. His son, who is his only progeny, the one who's going to carry on his name, dies. And where does the cancer show up? The cancer shows up in his testicles. What is the testicle? The testicle is the generative life force organ of the body that produces the sperm that's going to lead to the production of progeny. So it was, as far as he was concerned, as he came to understood, his progeny was cut off. His life, his ongoing legacy of life was terminated. And from that, he understood there's a relationship. And we're talking about relationships. What's the relationship of something that's going on in your social life that may be related to your mental life, that may be related to your emotional life, that may be related to your physical life, and overall, all of that may be related to your spiritual life or social life. Moral life. So you have these five elements at play: physical, emotional, mental, social, and moral, spiritual. So he, and we'll look at that in a moment. So he went about trying, as a researcher would in medicine, he tried to find out, is this something unique to me, or is this something that is more common than we would expect or suspect from my model's point of view? So he went about looking at 1,500 women who had breast cancer, and they had a mammography reports that showed tumors, the cancer in the breast. He was able to do PET scans neurologically because he had an interest in and was a neurologist, and he looked at the PET scans of these women, and lo and behold, he found in a certain portion of the brain a spot that seemed to correlate in its way as a dark spot being there with the dark spot in the lung. And he found this almost unanimously in 1,500 women that had cancer of the breast. He had his consciousness was raised to a point where he understood that this boy died, and he learned of the death, and then there was a shock of recognition, and then a month later for him, the cancer of the testicle shows up. So there's a shock, and he got very interested in shocks, and what the reprisal is of a shock. What does it do for us? What happens to us in a shock? What effect may it have in our system? So he asked these 1,500 women, he interviewed them, and what he discovered was that in every situation, there was a shock. That is, that the husband had announced to the woman that he was leaving her. And when that shock was announced to her, what came after it, in a very short order of time, was the cancer of the breast. So we're now seeing the testicle. That's your reproductive organ. That's for the man. That's very connected to the issues about losing his progeny. What about the breast? For the breast, it is the organ of sexuality and the organ of nutrition for the woman. It's both the organ of mothering and the organ of sexual experience and so on. And this husband is saying, you're no longer interesting to me, or I found somebody else who may be younger, different. There's not, it's just over and I'm leaving. So the shock, the imposition of the husband's comment to her that he was leaving her, the question of loss and what loss means in a person's life as a shock, and what happens to an individual when a shock comes. There was a story in the papers many years ago that I saw in which a father was called by the police department and told that his son died in a drug bust. He was a cop, and he was shot to death in the drug bust. The father died on the spot, fell out of a heart attack and died right there. The shock. And I think all of you are understanding that you've had shocks and that there have been shocks in your life. And what we would tie them to, as we're going to do more deeply, is to see how there is a relational experience between the physical, the emotional, the mental, the social, and the moral. If we look further in the social, in the spiritual, and that almost invariably, when there is a condition like this that occurs in you, that you will find that there's a relationship issue in your life that has gone astray, gone awry, gone amiss. Something has happened that has created a shock in your life to some degree, which has had these repercussions in you. And that gives us a broader look at this whole situation, because we can go from self-care, which I talked to you about, these people I just shared with you who had cancer, and how they took upon themselves self-care. And then what we are expanding into in finding the meaning of this condition and looking at its purpose and looking at what it's offering to us and what the gifts that it may be sharing with us. And I know that some of you may be quizzical about that. How can it be a gift? And I can't tell you the number of times that people have called me after having recovered from this condition to tell me that it was a gift because it allowed them to sit up and take notice of their lives in a way that they weren't able to do before. And they made some shifts, some valuable shifts in their lives, and they took on a new value system in their lives, and they saw life through a different lens. And this became a turning point by a person who's been an expert in dealing with this condition along these lines, named Lawrence Lashan, who wrote a book that you might look into called Cancer as a Turning Point. It became a turning point, and as it did for Dr. Hammer, the this can become a turning point. And I recall in a certain circumstance, the woman, two circumstances I would share with you. One is a woman with cancer of the breast, happened when her husband upped and announced to her, "I'm leaving." And cancer came. He said to himself, I can't be such a dirty rat. It's not right of me. I can't leave my wife in a condition like this. It's not correct. I feel I'm not cold-hearted about this. I feel caring for her. I do have some loving for her. I'm not in love with her now, but I do have some loving and caring for her. I do have some degree of feeling for her, some compassion. And so when I can't leave, he stays. What happened? Well, we don't have an interactive here, so you can't give me an answer I can hear right away. But what happened was, as he said to her, "I'm staying. I can't leave you. It's not correct. I can't do that." The cancer disappeared. Once the cancer disappeared, he said, "Oh, okay, she's free now. She's healed. It's all gone. The condition is settled, and it's not there anymore." So he said to her, "Now that you're well, I'm leaving." And as he announced this to her, a short period after that, the cancer came back. And so he then said, "I can't go ahead with this." She's got it back again. "I can't bring myself to do this." He stayed. The cancer disappeared. Just giving this to you as a little way of understanding how powerful, how powerful the social relationships are and the moral relationships in our lives, which are the fabric and foundation that you'll find at the basis and of all of the conditions that come to our attention and that we are beset with in our lives. That you'll find almost invariably a relational situation in which your social relationship of whatever sort it is has taken a turn for what you might call the worse in yourself, and your whole system takes a turn, what you might call the worse, physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, and perhaps also spiritually and morally at the same time. So you're getting to see that we're looking at a larger context for this condition and what it may provide for us as answers to our lives and what we may be able to understand more deeply about it. Why? Because the more you know about it, the more you are aware of all of the processes and the factors going into this situation, the physical being just one element of it, but not the whole story. That when you know the whole story and you're able to piece this together, what happens with this knowing and this understanding is that what is stimulated within us is a natural healing response. There's a natural response that takes us into balance and wholeness and healing. In fact, if you look at the root of the word health, you will find a Greek root, and the word healing. You'll find a Greek root in the etymological dictionary, Kailo, kalo, and out of this root, which is a parent, arises 6 siblings, 6 words that come out of this root that are organically connected to each other as siblings and are coming from the same parent. It's a family. So the root of kalo gives rise to whole, wholesome, hale, H-A-L-E, health, heal, whole, and holy. So we're talking about a healthcare system, bringing a healthcare system in which you become whole, which brought into play by your knowing more and more about who you are, what the relationships are, what's going on in yourself and relationships in the world in which we dwell all the time, and what's going on with us emotionally and mentally and physically and morally, because the word holy comes out of the same root and it's all connected. A healthcare system that is giving us a larger whole picture of ourselves in all of these dimensions of physical, emotional, mental, social, and moral life. that constitutes our activity all the time, every day, in every way, everywhere we are. That's an education that is part of this healthcare system that I will share with you much more about in the next three meetings and the term I made for it. But that is not going to have us neglect the self-care, because we're not neglecting the situation that you're presenting, that you're finding in yourself. A woman that I worked with who had cancer of the breast, she went and was diagnosed. She decided that she could not bear the idea of having chemotherapy because she searched into it. This was over 25, 30 years ago as well. And she searched into it and she saw for herself that the quality of life was not worth it. It was not worth it for her to live a quality of life which was not a quality of life, and that all of the deterioration that would take place through the chemotherapy as she searched into it would be such a restrictive life for this very cheerful and very extroverted and creative woman. She would not seek to do that to herself. She refused. She came to see me because I welcomed her. I had no vested interest in what she was doing. I was setting up and I was creating, which I naturally do, and I naturally am, a healing relationship between myself and her and she, and the elements of that are coming. And then and as we got into it, we saw that there was a serious conflict that was going in her relationship to a daughter, and that they were estranged. And when the estrangement took place, it had its reflection in the physical and the mental and her emotional response of feeling sad and depressed and feeling the loss deeply and so on. So she came to understand, as it turned out, she summoned her will, and we did imagery process for her to take charge of the tumor, and she was able to shrink it to a very minimal amount, and she took care of the conflict that was going on in her feelings inwardly and what she was going through about her relationship to this estranged daughter. She felt well altogether, and she was satisfied with our work. She moved to another state down south and would contact me from time to time, and she would send me notes to tell me how she was doing. And over the 25-year period that I had contact with her, she wrote to me that, when I'm in conflict and I'm aware of the conflicts going on in my life, the tumor grows, and it actually is sort of pressing through the chest wall. When I resolve the conflicts, and I'm able to do that, the tumor recedes and it comes back into my body out of the chest wall, and the size of it becomes very small. Conflict comes, the tumor grows. Conflict resolved, the tumor recedes. And she went through this process constantly over a period of 2.5 decades of being in touch with me about that and giving me the lowdown about how she was able to take care of her own process. Do you go for chemo or don't you? We'll get into that more deeply. It's up to you. You have to come to that choice on your own, and we'll understand much more about that when we get into in the healing relationship and so on. There's a nice discussion of the healing relationship that I wrote about in my book called Healing into Immortality, which you can get, and you'll find a very nice chapter there. But I do want to go into a lengthy discussion about it with you during the course of our three next meetings together. So the So we found that there's much more to this than meets the eye. And there's a lot to learn that can have really beneficial effects on our physical condition, that it doesn't spell a situation in which we give up or CED, we don't cede our power to an outside authority or out there in the world as though they hold the answer. Our belief is at first that we hold the answer to our own health, our own wholeness, our own healing, and our own uh, uh, on our own coming into this way of living in life that can be uh, different and yet uh, giving us more resiliency, giving us resiliency and recovery possibilities that you never thought possible that were there within you. And so we have a real excursion to take together about this condition, and then we can apply it to all of the other kinds of difficulties that you're experiencing. Did want to emphasize that there's a natural healing force within us that's available, that we create, we spark, we ignite, we turn it on in ourselves, and so you have the possibility of turning your situation that seems dim or dismal into one that's very full of light and full of cheer. You can turn this around. And what I like to do as we're drawing to the end of this time together, I wanted to share with you uh, uh, possibilities for yourself that you can take away with you. Two ways of conducting imagery for yourself that can be healthy and health giving to you in terms of dealing with the condition of cancer. One of the, as I found in my many years of dealing in this area, and with all chronic conditions, and it's quite intense and very ongoing and self-consuming. One of the difficulties is that in your relationship to the medical profession, they present it in a way that you find yourself spending all of your time thinking and looking into and reading material about your condition, reading material about cancer, looking into it, asking questions about it, talking to other people about it. The way that it's presented is that you become consumed by a condition that consumes you. So you're being consumed by you're the consumer of a condition that consumes you, that you're being pushed to let it consume you, and so on. So the emotional response that's very powerful here is the intense anxiety that you feel. Anxiety, of course, being or worry or fear, all of them dealing with what is going to happen to me, that death is looming, that I'm going to die, that I'm concerned about what is, and that my mental state is such that I'm concerned about what's in front of me, what's lying in wait for me, what does the future hold for me, and so on. And it's reflective emotional states, or what I just mentioned, fear, worry, anxiety, and so on. And what I found that in doing the healing work, that what is probably 75, I don't like to designate it by percentage, but the overwhelming situation that's taking place that is feeding this condition, that is kind of helping feed this pernicious influence that has entered into our system. What's feeding it is the distressing emotional states that, if they can be taken charge of, you have won at least 3/4 or more of this battle that you're involved with. So I wanted to give you an imagery exercise to help you along to take charge of this influence that is so pervasive in dealing with this condition that you have experienced, or you know others are experiencing, that you might want to share with them. and so on. Was also obviously the work I'm giving you, and you'll learn subsequently in these next 3 Thursdays will be material for you, for yourself, and also to share with others, so that you can give them the benefits of what you learn and have yourself also experienced. So I will give you the exercise now for anxiety. There are many that you'll find in all of my writings. I have written over 3,000 imagery exercises. They're available on the web. They're available in the books, the Encyclopedia of Mental Imagery, Kabbalah for Inner Peace, Climbing Jacob's Ladder, Healing into Immortality, Waking Dream Therapy, the Healing Visualizations, which is the one that has become the classic work in the field, and so on. They're all there. It's all there. So it continues on now in the new book I'm writing, and so on. So it's all over. There's a lot available. But here's an exercise I think you might find useful. So the way to do the imagery is simple. You sit up straight in your chair. You put your feet flat on the floor. Don't cross your legs. Put your arms on the arms of the chair, and you sit up straight. And your arms are on the arms of the chair. If you don't have arms, you put your hands face down, palms down on your thighs. So you've taken on a vertical type of position, and the next step is to close your eyes so that you blot out the interference or the uh, being distracted by the external stimuli. Don't do imagery with external distractions that are either coming through sight or sound. Don't play music when you're doing imagery. Don't have anything coming from the outside. There are some people I've met who can't close who don't want to close their eyes. They, for whatever their reasons, they want to do it with their eyes open. There are very few I've met like that, and that's fine, as long as the space that you're looking at is free. It's a blank space, like a blank wall, or looking at a blank shade, or looking out the window into blank space. But generally, you close your eyes, and as you do that, you are turning your senses inward to discover this inner repository of self-knowing that is generally called, that we call a storehouse consciousness, the repository of all the knowledge of yourself. And then you begin to do a breathing that allows you to become quiet and calm. It actually is the quickest way to calm your feeling states down. Long, slow exhalations through the mouth, brief or normal inhalations through the nose. So you see that you're doing that 3 times. So as you're doing that, your sense of distressing emotions begin to calm down. You feel quiet, you feel relaxed, you feel a sense of serenity descending over you, and you have that quiet moment. You've created a free space away from all the hubbub, away from all the tumult and the turmoil that's surrounding you, outside of you, inside of you. You're making yourself clear to receive and to find the knowledge that's residing within you. All you need is this short moment of relaxation and quietness to get you to find what's there for you. So let's go ahead and do this. So you breathe out, close your eyes, feet flat on the floor, nothing crossed, sitting up straight, and turning your senses inward by closing your eyes, finding the inner repository of knowing, and you're breathing. 3 times out, long, slow exhalations, each followed by an inhalation. And having done so, see now the hands of anxiety that are strangling you. Sense and feel what that's like. Breathe out 1 time slowly. And now summoning your will to live and summoning your inner strength. Bring with you, as this is imagination and anything can happen, there are no rules of logic here. Bring with you whatever you need to remove those hands that is strangling you. Anything goes. Do whatever it takes, no matter what, and whatever you have to resort to remove those hands. And after doing so, notice how you feel and what your physical sensations are in yourself. Notice how you're breathing. And after doing so, breathe out and open your eyes. Generally, you'll find that the anxiety has receded or disappeared. But as we know, there are certain states in our existence, in our functioning, that have their own rhythm. Anxiety or fear, and so on, are emotional states that have their own rhythm. Pain has its own rhythm. So we do the exercise now, let's say for anxiety. Should it return, do the exercise again to rid yourself of the anxiety. You're building up a new habit of taking charge of your inner state of being. As you take charge of your inner state of being, you're going to take charge of your emotional life. So you do that whenever it occurs. Should it recur, do it again in the way that I've just shared with you. Now I want you to do an exercise for cancer healing itself. So now you're sitting up straight, closing your eyes. You'll get accustomed to this breathing as you do it over the course of time. Just like that, long, slow through the mouth and breathe through the nose. And we're doing now what's called a chlorophyll exercise to heal cancer. So now, on the next long out breath, see yourself sitting alongside a great tree. And as you're sitting there, you find yourself beginning to grow up alongside the tree, becoming taller and taller and taller and taller, as tall as the tree, so that your head, the top of your head, is at the top of the tree. And now breathe out one time slowly and merge with this tree. This tree is full of very florid leaves, flourishing leaves, big leaves, branches that are thick and strong. And these leaves are pouring chlorophyll into your system, through all the pores of your skin, through everywhere, through your scalp, through your face, through the rest of your body, through all the pores of your skin. And the chlorophyll is streaming from top to bottom throughout your body, absorbing all cancer cells and absorbing all the tumors, and taking away and cleansing yourself of all of these unwanted invaders into your system who are not there for your well-being. You're removing them. The chlorophyll is removing it and taking it away and cleansing you and giving you strength and well-being as it streams down through your body and then coming out through the soles of your feet and disappearing into the earth, carrying all these tumors and tumor cells as black or gray strands that are buried deep in the earth. Notice how you look, how you feel, any physical sensations. And after finishing, breathe out and open your eyes. You can do this dosing yourself with this imagery medicine, this spiritual medicine, 3 times a day, just like you would give yourself any supplement, herb, or pharmacological agent. Early morning when you wake up, late afternoon, 5 and 5:30, and before bed. Always sitting up, not lying down. And I'm glad to be with you this afternoon. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you again. I look so much forward to join again with you next Thursday and thereafter. Love and blessings to all of you, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye. Love you.